The night the Calabashes learned our names, the moon lay like a broken kola nut in the bowl of the sky, and the forest sang through its teeth. Our elders say there is a silence that is not the absence of sound, but the presence of waiting. That night, waiting crouched in the shadows like a panther, tail twitching, breath held. He came at dusk, as merchants do, riding a creaking cart drawn by a dun goat whose horns were notched like a diviner's tally. He wore a red cap crooked on his head and a travel-worn agbada that brushed the dust like a broom sweeping secrets. People called him Aroden, because his name had a way of walking ahead of him, peering around corners and returning to whisper in his ear. Some said he was born of a river and an iroko tree whose branches pierced the clouds. Others said a hyena had raised him and fed him moonlight. Children only knew that where he passed, birds forgot their songs and new words for fear sprouted, pale as mushrooms, on old tongues. Yet he smiled with teeth like milled cowrie, and his voice was sweet as palm wine. On his cart sat calabashes of every size and belly, long-necked flasks carved with lizard and lanternfish, round gourds tattooed with spirals and eyes, shallow bowls burnished until they drank the firelight. He had arranged them in rows, and when you stood at a certain angle and the wind took a certain breath, you could swear they looked back at you. Calabashes for fortunes, he sang, tapping one with his knuckle so that it answered with a soft, bell-like note. For wombs that wait, for farms that thirst, for shops whose doors yawn empty. Calabashes for luck. Buy, and let your hands learn generosity. When he spoke, people drew closer. Our market, Oja Afon, had seen its share of itinerants, drummers who braided thunder into cloth, wrestlers who could pin their own shadows, but never a seller of calabashes whose words fell on us like cassava flour and stuck to our tongues. He set a price that was neither low nor high, the price of a story that is too good not to hear. Ayamepo, he said to our potter, whose wrists were bracelets of clay, your king will grow jealous if you leave it empty. Take this gourd. Hang it by the door. It will keep the ash from sulking. And indeed, when she lifted it, the calabash trembled, as if the goat had brushed it and then apologized. A bird nested in her throat. She paid. Baba Kanda, he said to the farmer, your young mounds weep when the clouds pass and forget to kneel. Hold this bowl under your pillow. The rain will remember the smell of your house. Our people traded glances. Some laughed, some frowned. But see how a man's heart is a calabash itself, hollow, ready to be filled by whatever the road brings. The poor are the first to trust flowing water, they know wells run dry. Among those who watched was Kikelomo, a girl with a river's determination braided under her skull. She stood at the edge of the crowd, her wrapper tied tight, her eyes bright with the worry that has a mother's face. Kikelomo's father, Adinka the hunter, had lately returned from the forest with a limp and a story about a boar whose tusks were like moon horns and whose grunt was a drumbeat for dying. There had been fever after, and deaths. The line of their compound wall had begun to sag, but no one had yet noticed. Her father elbowed to the front. Adinka's hands were maps, rivers of scar, cities of colors. He knew the weight of a snare and the smell of blackened meat. He also knew the cheap remedy of hope. What does your God do for a hunter whose traps return empty? He asked. Speak without sugar. Aroden's eyes gleamed. Oh, Baba, he said, and he let the word curl around his tongue like smoke. I have just the one. This calabash was carved under a new moon and tamed with the hair of a leopard. Tie it at your belt while you enter the forest. It will remember the footsteps of the ancestors, those who hunted before you. It will lead your feet to where the bush breathes out prey. He shook a gourd the size of a baby's head, etched with zigzagging lines like forked lightning. It chimed once. Soft, shy. Adinka touched it. A warmth traveled up his fingers, a tingle like ants telling a secret. He hesitated, then reached for his pouch. Kilo NL. Kikelomo murmured, moving closer. Baba, be careful. Not every song is a lullaby. Adinka gave the calabash the way a man gives a woman a smile he will later deny. Hope is an old debt, he said. Today I will open the palm of my hand. A proverb arose in the crowd like a fish taking air. The tree that refuses the axe will always wear its own bark. People nodded, those who agreed and those who only wanted to look wise. Aroden's gaze flickered to Kikelomo. He had eyes like cowries flipped on the sand, white, unreadable. Your daughter is cautious, he said. Elders say, the wise one crosses the stream and remembers to thank both stones. A good daughter keeps her father's feet dry. He set the gourd in Adinka's hands. Keep it close. Feed it a drop of palm wine at dawn. Speak your desire into its mouth, softly. It will carry your words to the ears of the bush. He moved on, hands fluttering like moths, fitting calabashes to palms, naming each one as if calling an errant child home. This one, Agombanaro, the shield that turns aside bad luck. This, Ayalola, the bow that remembers the earth's kindness. This, Ioran, the work of heaven. The words held the old cadence. Names turned to ropes that tugged at hearts. The drum in the marketplace kept an honest beat. The sun folded itself into the horizon's cloth, and the smell of frying bean cake stilled the air. Before he covered his wares, Aroden raised a last calabash. It was small, the size of a calyx, and it had no design, only a smooth brown skin that reflected the firelight like an eye. For those who are lost, he said softly, almost to himself. For those whose feet walk a road that slides. No one bought that one. But the way he cradled it told Kikelomo it was not for sale. That night, they tied the gourd at Adinka's belt and put palm wine to its lips. Kikelomo watched her father close his eyes and whisper into the gourd's mouth, his breath fogging its smooth skin. He spoke to it as one speaks to a stubborn child, with patience sorted by threat and love. He slept with the gourd on his chest, and his snore sounded like a drum rolling down a hill. Kikelomo dreamed of a forest where the trees leaned together as if conspiring. Calabashes hung from their branches like nests woven by invisible birds. Each had a mouth. Each whispered. Some said names she knew, the syllables slipping out like fish. Some sang in languages the world had forgotten, or pretended to. A woman stepped from the shadows. Her wrapper was white. In her hands, she held a bowl that reflected the moon. My child, the woman said, your father is walking into a mouth. Whose mouth? Kikelomo asked. Some mouths are not on faces, the woman answered, her eyes deep as cool water. Some mouths are houses. Some are gods. Kikelomo woke with her tongue dry. At dawn, Adinka walked into the forest, the gourd at his belt knocking lightly against his thigh like a knuckle reminding him to mind his step. He came back before noon with a dika slung on his shoulders, its ice pale marbles of surrender. He came back the next day with a porcupine, the next with a bushbuck whose blood he thanked and tasted. People began to greet him with smiles that had meanings like folded cloths, one for celebration, one for envy. Baba, Kikelomo said, one evening when the 3 stones had loosened the cooking pot's tongue and the stew smelled of secrets. Are your feet leading you, or is the god dragging you? Adinka laughed and patted the god. When rain remembers your roof, he said, do you ask the cloud what debt it is paying? A hunter does not shake the tree that bears fruit, unless he wants to eat leaves. But the leaves speak, Kikelomo whispered, and it was true, the god made a faint murmur when no one touched it, a sound like a goat swallowing. Hard to hear unless you listened from the corner of your ear. She watched her father's skin, the way it seemed to shine but from beneath, like a lamp whose oil was not from palm nuts but from a stranger foot. Fear is an instrument, Adinka said. Bad drummers make noise with it. He went to sleep with a smile that had never before found his lips. But in the middle of the night, Kikelomo woke to find him sitting by the door, staring at nothing, as if the wall had told him a story and he did not know whether to believe it. In 3 weeks, Adinka's limp had shifted, it seemed to animate only when he remembered it. His straps sang to him like children returning from errands with their words full of sugarcane. People came to borrow a glance at his luck. They touched his shoulder, then touched their foreheads. The hole in the compound wall became less noticeable, the death wore veils. Kikelomo's mother, Abike, who had died when Kikelomo was 6, began to inhabit new corners of Kikelomo's thoughts, like a lizard that has always lived in the rafters but only now chooses to show itself. On some nights Kikelomo dreamed of her mother standing at the river, a calabash on her head, a baby on her back. In the dream, the river spoke in water talk, and Abike answered with silence, the kind that makes a river remember its mouth. A proverb walked through the village, its feet dusty. When the leper starts clapping for joy, see the moon behind him, there is always a reason. It carried a warning like an untied wrapper. Then old Baba Adichie, whose compound stood by the shade tree, bought a wide-mouthed calabash for the shrine where he fed his ancestors. He poured libation into it, and the palm oil shivered like a lizard's throat. He set kola nuts in it, and they cracked themselves. He brought it home that evening and set it by his bed, because age teaches you to keep your gods where your breath is. Those who slept nearby woke to hear him whispering to someone, or something. By morning his eyes were bright as a new coin and his back had forgotten its stubborn knot. He walked like a man remembering the steps of his youth. But within a week, his oldest daughter, Yorùbá, woke without her left hand's feeling. It returned by afternoon, but it came back thinner, as if someone had chewed it. A month later, the youngest son, Adichie, could not find his way home from the stream. He walked past his own compound 3 times, turned around, and wept. That same night, a wind walked the village like a widow refusing condolence. It made the lantern sigh. It knocked on doors, and people answered with their breath held. The chickens slept with their eyes open. When dawn came, Baba Adichie had forgotten his name. He sat in the doorway of his house and stared at the calabash with love so heavy it could anchor a canoe. He stroked it as one strokes a cat, and the god trembled, as if it had a throat. "They are losing something," Kikelomo whispered to Ayamepo, the potter, who had always looked at her with the patient smile clay has when it trembles under the palm. Not only old Baba. Others. Baba Kanda's youngest child does not dream anymore. The woman with the fat goats has begun to forget the face of her husband. Something is eating their destinies from the edges like termites. Ayamepo pressed her lips together. She had been suffering small forgettings. She had taken a lump of clay to the river and returned with a basket of yams. She had named the oven and scolded it for drinking the water meant for her thirsty throat. At night, she heard her calabash hum, and she hummed back because loneliness is a bird that comes when the house is too clean. Go to the elders, Kikelomo said, pushing. Tell them the soil is eating its children. Tell them to ask the diviner to read the word's palm. The elders are the first to drink the stranger's cola, Ayamepo said quietly. And see how sweet it is. The mouth does not scold sweetness. The Calabashes have made the elders sleep like babies and wake like cockerels. Their dreams are thick with fat. When prosperity is a guest, no one wants to change the mat. But a guest who refuses to leave is a thief, Kikelomo said. Ayamepo looked at her, and the woman's grief came and sat by the door. You are your mother's child, she said. Abike asked questions like she was trying to knit a rope out of clean air. Go, then. Go to Baba Fagbemi. Baba Fagbemi was a babaláwo whose back was hunched with stories and whose eyes had seen where thunder keeps its money. His compound sat under a silk cotton tree, where spirits hang their clothes to dry. He had a beard like a broom that had decided to grow on a face. His voice was the sound of a gourd rolling in a tray of cowries, clatter, pause, clatter. You came with sand in your eyes, he said to Kikelomo when she entered. What did the wind tell you? She knelt. Baba, we have brought strangers into our houses. They hang by our doors and sit by our beds. We give them wine, and they give us sleep. But our shadows are thinning. He nodded. The day a man eats a poison yam, his tongue is sweet until it turns black. Bring me a calabash. The one your father ties at his belt. Kikelomo hesitated, but fear turns daughters into thieves if they are made properly. She took Adinka's calabash while he bathed at the back of the house. When he came in, he roared with questions, but she tempered her eyes with tears and he, remembering Abike's ghost in their daughter, sighed and lay back. Baba Fagbemi set the calabash on a white cloth. He put 4 kola nuts into it and shook them. He whispered to Oromela, God of wisdom, in that old cascade that sounds like water speaking to stone, Oromela Emojuba. Baba mi, Ibori, Iboya. Open the road in this gourd as one opens a knot with spit. He flicked palm oil into the air, and it hung like stars, then fell. The calabash shuddered. There was a sound like teeth. Baba Fagbemi's hand came away bleeding. It beat you, Kikelomo breathed. Her heart was a drum in the hands of a mad drummer. It tasted me, Baba Fagbemi said, not displeased. He lifted the gourd and put his ear to it. He listened for a long time. When he raised his head, his eyes were old as winter. This calabash is a road, he said. It leads nowhere and everywhere. Its mouth is a door to a room without walls. It is a basket with a bottom that moves. Who made it? Kikelomo asked, though she already knew. Someone who was taught to braid wind and milk shadows, he said. Someone who learned the names of the little gods, the ones who grow in abandoned courtyards and move like once beloved dogs. I taught a boy like that once. Long ago. He had a hunger that woke him at night and fed him on its own emptiness. Aroden, Kikelomo said. Baba Fagbemi's eyes lifted, and his face was what happens when thunder looks at its child and recognizes its stubbornness. He was called Olekunebio in my house, then. The river's keeper. He had no mother that I met. He said she was a water woman who lived in a hole under a stone. He had no father. He said his father was the wind that forgets to knock. He was found as a boy near the market, naked, holding a gourd that had nothing in it and everything. I fed him. I taught him the names of herbs and stars. He learned as if the world were moving away from him and he must memorize it before it went. What happened? Kikelomo asked softly. Griot came like a rooster visits dawn, Baba Fagbemi said. He wanted what diviners spend lives learning, the audio verses, the veils of faith. He learned some too quickly, without the patience that lets knowledge sit down. One day, another apprentice's shadow stayed in the doorway when the apprentice walked out. Later the boy himself fell sick and died, speaking words that tasted of iron. I suspected poison in the soup of envy, but I lacked proof. Aroden left soon after, carrying his gourd and his hunger. He tapped at the Inca's gourd with a finger. This is not a calabash, child. It is a mouth that eats the thread of a man's ori, his destiny. One drop at a time. It takes the wealth of the tomorrow to season today's stew. But the debt must be paid. When the future arrives with empty hands, it will knock like a creditor who speaks softly because his knife is sharp. How do we close the mouth? Kikelomo whispered. How do we pull our names out of its throat? Baba Fagbemi looked into the gourd. He spoke an incantation that was not for Kikelomo's ears, and the gourd smoked. He coughed out a cloud like a small storm. This calabash carries the signatures of many mouths, he said. It steals by calling. It learns your name as a mother learns her child's breath. To close it, you must unteach it. You must call on those older than hunger, older than theft. Who is older than hunger? Kikelomo asked. He smiled, a slow, sad smile. Death. And the earth. And the ancestors who eat kola nut with both hands. You must go to the river where the spirits wash their feet. Bring sand from where the current shouts against the rock. Pluck one hair from your father's head while he sleeps, and do not let it know why it is taken. Find a goat whose birth call was lost and a hen whose cheeks do not look like her. Then bring a white cloth that no one has touched angrily. Come the night the moon hides its face and leaves the sky to gossip with itself. Then we will speak to the things that do not admit to being spoken to. Baba, Kikelomo said, mouth dry, heart beating. What will it cost? Every medicine tastes of its own poison, he said. The question is not what it costs, but who pays. She thought of her father's laugh, newly minted, of his eyes bright with future. She thought of her mother in dreams, her white cloth bright as a tooth. I will pay, she said. I am a daughter. Then be a river, he said. Rivers pay their debts by movement. In the weeks that followed, the Calabashes multiplied in Oja Afon the way secrets breed in a house that keeps women and silence. A rodent's cat scraped the road each 7 days of market. He knew which god called to which person the way a trader knows which plan is a kind of trap. A woman whose womb wept bought a smooth-lipped bowl and dreamed of a child smiling like a new yam. A man whose farm had grown stubborn bought a flask with an antelope carved in its belly, and his yam swelled with a sudden memory of generosity. A girl who loved a boy who did not love her back bought a small, trembling gourd and listened as it sang her name until she believed her name had little wings. In their houses, the Calabashes hummed and whispered and learned to say. People fed them palm wine, salt, oil, new words. People began to tell their Calabashes secrets they would not tell a living ear. And their destinies thinned. Slowly, at first. A needle pricked here, a dropped thread there. A man forgot the song that had coaxed his wife from her father's compound. A woman dropped the way she looked in the eyes of the woman she was before she married. An old hunter mistook his right hand for his left and set his trap wrong, catching a goat instead of a bush pig. He apologized to the calabash. Kikelomo moved as a shadow moves near a lamp, seen and not seen. She gathered what the old man had requested. River sand, heavy and bright. A hair from Adinka's head, plucked with a kiss disguised as a caress. A goat whose mouth never learned silence, although its mother had died birthing it. A hen whose chicks came from eggs the hawk had brought but not eaten. A white cloth ironed by sunlight and folded by breath. The night of the new moon came like a lie without eyebrows. The sky had no jewelry, we could hear it pretending. In Baba Fagbemi's compound, under the silk cotton tree, the air thickened. He spread the white cloth on the packed earth. He set the calabash in the center. Around it, he placed 4 cowries with their mouths open to the cardinal directions. He set a bowl of river sand, a bowl of palm oil, a bowl of water that had been asked to remember rain. He tied red and white threads to the god's neck. Sit, he said. Sit as if you are kneeling on your mother's lap. Kikelomo sat. The goat bleated. The hen clucked, counting her chicks. The night pressed close, eavesdropping. Baba Fagbemi closed his eyes. He started to speak, and the words poured out not like speech but like water finding a deeper path under stone. Ejime, I hail you. Oromala, owner of Ifo, the Wesia who knows the climb that won't break a woman's back. Messenger who eats offerings that do not belong to him and still delivers the message, we will salt your tongue with kola, so deliver and do not devour. Ogun, scent of iron, remember we are your children and our blood is your debt. Ancestors, wearers of cool cloth, come, let us talk where fire listens. He sprinkled sand on the calabash. It sighed. He dripped oil down its sides. It shivered. In a voice that seemed dragged from a well, he sang. Calabash, God, Igbo with 1,000 mouths. You who hold soup and secrets. Today you release what you swallowed by stealth. Baba Fagbemi closed his eyes. He started to speak, and the words poured out not like speech but like water finding a deeper path under stone. Ejime, I hail you. Oromala, owner of Ifo, the Wesia who knows the climb that won't break a woman's back. Messenger who eats offerings that do not belong to him and still delivers the message, we will salt your tongue with kola, so deliver and do not devour. Ogun, scent of iron, remember we are your children and our blood is your debt. Ancestors, wearers of cool cloth, come, let us talk where fire listens. He sprinkled sand on the calabash. It sighed. He dripped oil down its sides. It shivered. In a voice that seemed dragged from a well, he sang. Calabash, God, Igbo with 1,000 mouths. You who hold soup and secrets. Today you release what you swallowed by stealth. You will vomit destinies like a fish stunned by thunder. Spills its silver into a basket. This sand remembers rivers' honesty. This oil remembers groundnut's patience. This hair remembers the head it leans upon. Emi Allegora, owner of the god, we untie your knots. He tied the red and white threads together, then pulled. The knot formed a small, stubborn belly. He spat on it. It unraveled itself, ashamed. The calabash whined. Baba Fagbemi stroked it like a frightened dog. Bring your mother, Aroden, he whispered to the air, and the hairs rose on Kikelomo's arm. Bring the one who taught you that emptiness is a kind of hunger. Just then, the wind that keeps watch at the edge of the village stepped into the compound. It smelled of rain that once fell and of fires that had been born and died. It stirred the white cloth. It sat in Baba Fagbemi's beard and listened. Kikelomo closed her eyes. She saw a river, its hips swaying, its surface putting on the face the sky insisted upon. A woman stood in the river's mouth, a calabash on her head. Her eyes were the color of fish bellies. She smiled, and Kikelomo tasted a spoon of salt in her mouth. The woman said, every god has the memory of the vine in its throat. Bend the vine, you bend the god. This boy, Aroden, his mother sold his ori to the river to pay for her own desire. He was born with a debt no child should carry. He has been weaving a robe of stolen threads. It fits him poorly. All thieves think the clothing of the righteous will suit them. But you cannot wear a borrowed skin without the fleece complaining. How do we make him naked? Kikelomo asked, in the not language of dream. Make him wear his mother's promise, the river woman said. Make the dead stand up and call his name. When Kikelomo opened her eyes, the calabash had swollen like a frog. Baba Fagbemi's hands moved deftly, ancient. He took the hair, the one stolen from Adichie, and threaded it through the god's lip. He tied it to the white cloth. He spoke an audio verse, one of those that hang in the air, heavy as rain. Those who steal shadows think the sun will forget them. They skin the day and wear it, not knowing that night remembers the smell. The lizard of the courtyard thinks itself a crocodile in a dream, but asks water to confirm. Ifo says, what you take in the marketplace, you will pay for by the river. The god's humming grew a spine. It became a song with bones. It was the sound of many names spoken together, a chorus of forgettings. Kikelomo tasted iron. She looked at Baba Fagbemi. You have done the patient work, he said. Now we will go where the shadows dance, and we will slap their faces like disobedient children. The festival, Kikelomo breathed. Guluda is in 2 nights. He nodded. When the masked ones call the mothers and praise the mothers, Aroden will be there, weaving baskets of silence with his eyes. We will make his baskets fall apart. Guluda arrived like thunder wearing beads. The compound thrummed with drumming that had been taught to hands by ancestors who slept under the tree roots with the bones of their own fathers. Masked dancers stepped into the open, their wooden faces painted with the patience of wood that had learned to pretend to be flesh. Mothers clapped until the air grew hot. The praises were sung of wombs that had held the future and released it with dignity, of breasts that had nourished kings and beggars, of the old ones who had learned to walk backward into the future and forward into the past. Aroden came dressed in a robe of cloth whose patterns had the eyes. He smiled. The calabashes on his cart vibrated like drums that had learned to tremble. The crowd parted for him as people part for a snake that may be a rope, and he took his place at the edge of the dance. His eyes flicked over the faces as if he were counting coins. Kikelomo stood with the gourd tied in a white cloth at her waist. Baba Fagbemi stood beside her, his staff in one hand, his other hand palming a small gourd stopper carved with the face of a weeping child. Remember, he said, we are not breaking gods. We are breaking hunger. The drummers raised the tempo until the air shook like a bowl of beans in a careless hand. The masked mother's feet spoke. The children of the compound yelped with joy. The sky leaned in until its ear brushed the tallest tree. Aroden lifted a calabash, held it to his lips, and whispered. Kikelomo felt something in her spine cringe. She stepped forward. Aroden, she called. Her voice was a string that she tightened with both hands. Seller of gourds that drink sweat and call it wine. Will you show us the one you do not sell? A shift in the crowd, a ripple, a drop of fear into milk. Aroden turned. For a moment, he looked less like a man and more like a rope stuffed with dust. My daughter, he said, and his voice tried to be fatherly and failed. During a festival, are you the type to pour cold water on a cooking pot? Go and dance. Let your feet sweat and your heart borrow new songs. You carry a small gourd with no markings, Kikelomo said, ignoring. You cradle it like a mother cradles a child she does not want to name. Aroden's eyes narrowed. In them, Kikelomo saw a boy who had gone hungry beside a generous river that laughed as it stole his reflection. Some gods teach others how to behave, he said. Or instruct them in theft, Baba Fagbemi added, stepping into the circle. His voice carried like a proverb on the lips of an elder. A hush fell like a cloth snuffing a lamp. The drumming slipped, stumbled, recovered. People stared and turned as people do when a mask falls and reveals a familiar face. You, Aroden said, and in the one-syllable Kikelomo had a lifetime of chewed anger. Baba Fagbemi, who feeds his apprentices sand and calls it wisdom. You old God, you old mouth. Be careful how you speak to a man whose beard has eaten more salt than your tongue has licked, an elder snapped. Another muttered, when a child calls the river small, his mother has not taught him where the crocodiles sleep. Aroden raised a calabash high, one with eyes carved into its belly. These people came to me with empty hands and swelling desire, he said, trying to make his voice a net. I filled their hands. I polished their desires until they shone. Why call me thief when their own mouths asked me to be plague? We asked you for water, Kikelomo said, stepping forward. You pumped us honey that spoils. You fed us from the future and left our tomorrows limping. You speak like a child taught to fear sugar cane, he sneered. Look. He swept his arm. Has not the hunter found meat? Has not the trader counted coins? Has not the woman without a child dreamed of feet pattering like rain? Your father's belt sings every evening. Or does the truth shame you, that his fortune was born in my God? I stunned. Adichie stood in the crowd, his hands bowed. He had heard and not heard. Confusion was a mat under his feet. Kike, he said, mouth dry. Do not shame me in front of men. Baba, she said, and the word was a rope that had saved or killed many. Baba Fagbemi lifted his staff. Aroden, he said, and his voice walked into old times and returned with witnesses. Your mother made a bargain with a river. Your ori for her heart's wish. You have spent your life trying to patch the hole with other people's cloth. But the river does not forget death, and clothes borrowed in the marketplace will disgrace you by the stream. Today, your gods will learn to vomit. He struck the earth. The drummers, compelled by something older than command, changed the beat. The masked mothers turned their faces toward the two men. The calabashes on Aroden's cart trembled. A sound rose. A hum that became a whisper that became a wail. People pressed hands to ears. The gods' mouths began to open, as if they had lips and were trying to form the word for mercy. Aroden pushed forward, fury running in his mouth. He raised the small, unmarked god Kikelomo had noticed before. Touch nothing, he hissed. This one carries the knot of my name. Then let us untie it, Kikelomo said, and before fear could advise caution, she leaped. She snatched at the small god. Aroden's fingernails raked her wrist, leaving 4 crescent moons. She roared, the world turning to dust and feet and the drum's insistence. The god hit the earth and did not crack, instead it bounced once, like a heart. Baba Fagbemi's staff came down on it, gentle as a blessing, hard as iron. The god sang. Not hum, not whisper, song. A woman's voice, layered with river noise. A lullaby that had wept so long it had turned into something else. Kikelomo's eyes blurred with tears she could not explain. Aroden staggered as if struck from inside. Olekonebio, the song said. My child. The debt I wove has run out of thread. Come. No, Aroden snarled, clutching his head. No. I built rooms to hide in. I sewed doors. I taught mouths to bite. I will not go to the place under the stone. The calabashes on his cart began to chant names. Names of the living, names of the recently dead, names of the not yet born. Each name was a pebble thrown into a basin of oil, ripples that smelled of iron. The people in the crowd cried out as they heard their own names or the names of their beloveds. Adichie heard his name and staggered as if a rope had looped his chest. Old Baba Adichie put a hand to his head and sobbed as his forgotten name slid back into his palm, hot as yam from the fire. The woman who had dreamed of a child touched her belly and cried out, mindful of visions of small hands and small graves. The drummers' hands threatened to fail them, but they gathered themselves and struck the old rhythm that reminds the world it will not wobble. Baba Fagbemi spoke another incantation, this one a net thrown behind the song. Destiny stolen by smooth gods. Return home with your feet wet but your eyes dry. Do not bring the river into the house. Carry only your names, your true faces. Leave the thief in the mouth he prepared. One by one, the calabashes cracked. They did not shatter. They opened like eyelids. Something flitted out of each, sometimes only a taste of a thing, a color, a remembered laughter, sometimes a weight that knocked a person to their knees with its return. Ayamepo, who had begun to forget why clay let itself be shaped, cried out and ran to her kiln, throwing open its mouth and sobbing into its throat. Baba Kanda felt rain on his tongue and began to praise in a voice that was half goat and half thunder. The old hunter whose traps had turned foolish smiled like a man who has remembered where he buried a debt. A rodent screamed. It was a sound few had heard and fewer had survived, a child's scream inside a man's throat. He clutched the small gourd, the one that sang. Mother, he pleaded. I have built myself. I have stolen the bones to carve my own. Do not undo me. Olikonebio, the voice sang, unturning. A promise is a stone one must carry, even across 7 rivers. I traded your ori for love. Love wore out its slippers and went barefoot. The river does not forget what it has eaten. Then let the river eat you, he spat, foaming. He flung the little gourd toward the ground, perhaps to break it, perhaps to marry it deeper to dust. Kikelomo moved with a quickness she had not been born with, only borrowed from fear. She caught the gourd against her chest. It was cold and hot. It throbbed like an egg before hatching. In that moment, a figure stepped into the circle. She looked like a woman and not like a woman. Her wrapper was white, beaded with water that did not fall. In her hair, small fish swam. Her eyes were deep enough to drown in, and a rodent scream faltered like a child seeing the shadow of the cane before feeling its stripe. River Mother, someone whispered, and the words rolled over the crowd like a wave. Some fell to their knees. Others hid their faces. Even the masked mothers bowed, wood knowing wood, spirit knowing spirit. I have come for what is mine, the river woman said. Her voice was not loud, but the air carried it the way a child carries a secret to its favorite ear. A rodent fell at her feet like a chopped plantain. Give me time, he begged. I am making myself from the good cloth I have stolen. Soon it will fit. Soon I will walk without pain. No cloth woven from theft will warm you, she said gently. You were born empty of the thing that stores rain. It is not your crime. But you made crime the bridge you walked. You sucked on hearts and called it palm wine. You taught the gods to drink blood and not remember the taste. The ancestors have listened to the wailing. The earth has turned on its left side. The Orisa have murmured. It is time. He tried again. I will return what I took, he said, words tripping over each other. See. He gestured wildly at the cracked calabashes, the sighing crowd, the rain of returning destinies. I am paying the debt. The debt is not to them, she said. It is to yourself. And no man can pay a debt to the house he has already burned. Baba Fagbemi lifted his staff again, but the river woman held up a hand. Old father, she said. You taught him well enough to be dangerous. You wished to see if his hunger could be a horse you rode to wisdom. It is not your failing to know that some goats refuse to be tied. I see my mistakes dance in his shadow, Baba Fagbemi sighed. May the river accept a palm full of regret. The river accepts everything, she said, with a twist of the mouth that was almost a smile and almost a snarl. That is its curse and our relief. She turned to Kikelomo. Daughter, she said. You have brought my child's not back to me. You have wreaked your father's wrath and your own breath. What do you want? Kikelomo thought. The easy request, the one that jumped out like a fish, was to ask for her mother back, alive, hands warm and busy, voice stern and loving. But the river's eyes were deep. Kikelomo knew the price of such things. She also knew how much people must die to oil the road for those who must live. I want my people's names to return to their mouths, she said. I want the Calabashes to forget us. Done, the river woman said, and the air is like a tightly tied wrapper let down a notch. And for yourself, child of a bike, what will you take? Kikelomo swallowed. May my father's laugh never be taken from him again, she said. The river woman's glance brushed Adichie, who had grown strange under the sudden weight of his returned destiny. His shoulders squared. His eyes steadied. He will forget and remember in the proper measures, she said. No god will swallow his future again. As for you, your mother sends this. She reached out and touched Kikelomo's forehead. The touch burned. Kikelomo smelled smoke and river foam and saw, for a blink, her mother's face close enough to kiss. Then the river woman turned to Aroden. Come, she said. He screamed and the scream grew smaller. It became a boy's wail, then a baby's hungry snuffling. Mama, he whispered hoarsely. I have never had a lap. Will yours be soft? The river's lap is always soft, she said, and her face broke into sorrow. That is why so many drown in it. She opened the small gourd Kikelomo held. A light poured out, not white or gold, not any color fire borders with. It was the light of promises unkept and debts paid in sorrow. It wrapped Aroden like a woven cloth and pulled. He shrank, or perhaps he was always that small. He slid toward the god's mouth slowly, as if the air were honey and his body a fly. At the last moment he looked up, his eyes bleached by fear. Baba, he croaked to Baba Fagbemi, not defiance now but plea. Father. Baba Fagbemi closed his eyes. A person's character is the raft he builds for the flood, he said, voice broken. I would call you son if it would lighten you. But that would be theft too. He raised his palm in blessing and farewell. May your emptiness find a place where it does not hunger. Aroden slid into the gourd. The river woman pressed the stopper into it, the one carved like a weeping child. The gourd sighed and settled in her palm like a bird that has remembered tiredness. She looked around at the people. Do not make rooms for hunger in your houses, she said. Make rooms for sorrow, it will visit anyway. Feed it and let it sleep. It will live with blessings if you do not lock the door. As for the gourds that remain, she flicked her fingers. The calabashes that had not cracked melted back into vines that broke and crawled to the edge of the compound. They shriveled and sank into the earth like shame. The market's air took a long breath. Somewhere, a child laughed, thin, tremulous, real. The masked mothers resumed their dance. The drummers found a rhythm that spoke of relief wrapped in mourning. People tore the pieces of gourd on the ground and found in them nothing but pumpkin smell and the brownness of dead wood. They began to collect them, to throw a few on the elders' fire, to carry others to the shrine where the ancestors could be reminded that their mouths are clean. Baba Fagbemi leaned on his staff. He looked at Kikelomo. "You have done a thing that will breed proverbs," he said. Kikelomo smiled, a thin crescent, exhausted. "Let one of them be this," she said. "The calabash that steals soup will one day learn to drink the sea and drown. The tongue that eats honey in the dark will meet sugar ants at dawn." He chuckled. "I will teach it to my beard." Adinka came forward awkwardly. He looked at his daughter as if seeing her from a new riverbank. "Kike," he said. "I." He broke off, the words bumping into each other like goats. He reached and took her hand, the one scratched by a rodent's nails. He bent his head and kissed the crescents. "Forgive the foolishness that builds on fear," he said. "You are your mother's hand returning." Kikelomo pressed her forehead to his knuckles. "You are my father's laugh returning," she said, tears making her voice salt. "We will live from the future at the pace the ground agrees to give us." The village exhaled. People went home to count their names and return them to their places. Some wept for what would never be mended. The woman who had dreamed of a child now woke to find only the dream, warm and gone. She wept into her husband's chest and he let her. That is a kind of destiny too. The old ones gathered and decided what story to tell the children, a story of how greed is a vine that strangles the tree that feeds it, how destiny is a road that cannot be borrowed without paying in skin. The river woman walked away, steps leaving no trace, the small gourd tucked under her arm. Those who watched long enough saw her fade at the edge of sight, the way the past fades when you stop dragging it into the present by its tired ankles. Later that night, Kikelomo sat under the silk cotton tree where Baba Fagbemi had taught the gourd to be ashamed. The stars moved lazily. She thought of the boy in the man, of empty things trying to fill themselves. She thought of her mother placing a hand on her head from under the river. She thought of Calabashes, honest and dishonest. She took the remaining gourd, her father's, and buried it at the base of the tree. She whispered, "Sleep," and covered it with earth. When she stood, she felt taller without the weight. Ayamepo visited in the morning with bread hot as a new proverb. The kiln sang, the potter said, and her hands trembled with relief. It sang that clay was always meant to be taught, not bullied. It asked me to forgive it. Imagine. She laughed and cried, wiping her face with the same cloth. "Here. Eat. You did a thing." Kikelomo broke bread, shared, listened to the village rediscover its morning noises without the extra hum of borrowed futures. The young men whistled. The young women rolled their eyes. The elders complained that the world was losing its manners, as it does every morning. The day wore the proper cloth for its size. At sunset, Baba Fagbemi called the elders, and they called the people, and we stood in a circle and spoke the story aloud until it became a thing with legs. Stories walk faster once they are given sandals. A child asked, as children do, will a rodent come back? Thieves return to the market even when they have been beaten, an elder said. But the river keeps what is given to it. And remember, some thieves are not people. Their desires dress cleverly, wearing names that sound like our own. What if hunger comes again? The child pressed, stubborn as a goat. Then we will cook it, yam, Ayamepo said. It will eat and become too slow to chase us. And we will trade our impatience for baskets that do not have holes. Baba Fagbemi lifted a hand. Listen, he said. The night was quiet, not waiting, only watching. The calabashes in the houses were silent, ordinary, containers of soup and palm wine and herbs, not mouths. Teach your children to recognize the voices that lend their names, he said. Some mouths love you. Some only want to be you. Remember, a name is a kind of house. Do not let a stranger sleep in it without making him pay rent. We nodded. We sang the old songs softer and the new songs loud. We slept like people who know that tomorrow's floor will hold. Years went by. Kikelomo married a palm wine tapper who had hands like branches and a laugh like a waterfall sleeping on rock. They had children whose feet learned to dance before their tongues learned to shape words. Kikelomo told them stories under the moon's cracked bow, stories that did not always end well but always ended with a lesson that rounded the edges of grief. She told them of Aroden, the calabash seller whose mouth had been a basket he tried to fill with other people's fruits. She told them of their grandmother Abike, who still washed clothes in the river under the stone, who sent gifts that arrived as a thought at dawn. She told them of the river mother who took her child and saved the village, and of the babaláwo who realized that sometimes wisdom is a knife you should keep sheathed when a child is at your table. One harmattan night, when dust sat on the lips of the day and made speech taste of chalk, a stranger came to Oja Afon. He wore a robe that had seen spills of 100 soups. He carried no wares, only a staff with a gourd tied to it. He stood at the market and waited as if waiting were a job that paid well. People spent his presence with their eyes. Kikelomo, now a woman with beads in her hair that only wise women wear, went to him. Stranger, she said. What do you sell? He smiled, and it was a simple smile, a child's kind. Nothing, he said. I have come to hear a story. I heard the birds passing overhead and whispering that there is a place where calabashes learn their manners. Kikelomo looked at the gourd tied to his staff. It was small and unmarked and it did not hum. Sit, she said. I will tell you of the night the calabashes learned our names, and then we taught them to forget. He sat. People gathered, because stories are meat and we are always hungry. The staff leaned against the market pole. The gourd watched with its blind eye. Kikelomo began, her voice the rhythm of pestle and mortar, of river feet, of the masked mother's dance. She spoke of hunger shaped like a man and love shaped like a death and the river that keeps all promises. She spoke until the sun fell on its face and the stars came out to be counted. When she finished, The stranger sat quietly and then stood. "Thank you," he said. "My mother sells fish in a town where the river bites the land. She told me that stories are the only clothes we are not shamed for wearing borrowed. I came to borrow yours. I will launder it and return it different, but not less." He touched the gourd. "And this? It is empty. But sometimes I put my ear to it and hear my own name. It is a good thing to know your own name and to hear it in your own voice." He left. We did not ask his name. Some said later it was a rodent, released and reborn, walking the earth with a new hunger he could feed honestly. Others said it was only a man with ears that walked well. All I know is that our calabashes now are vessels that know their work and do not whisper in the night. We use them to carry water and to share wine. We carve them with lizards that dream of sun and fish that dream of river and faces that smile because the hands that carve them remember pain but choose grace. Sometimes, when the moon is a kola nut broken cleanly, and the drum skin is tight like worry, we hear the river singing. We listen, because the river always has news, even when we pretend not to hear. We remember the proverb. The calabash floats not because it is empty, but because it knows how to carry air. We remember that not all air belongs to us. We teach our children to pour out what does not feed them. We teach them to feed the right things. As for the moral, what else but this? Destiny is a debt you owe to your best self. You can postpone payment by lying, by stealing, by carving mouths into gods and teaching them to say what you should have swallowed. But the day will come when the river knocks with a soft knuckle. And when you open the door, you will learn this final proverb. What you hide in a calabash to cheat the night, the dawn will ask you to drink.
If you enjoyed this story and want to experience more captivating Nigerian folktales, urban legends, and supernatural mysteries, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Tales from Mother Estee. Your support helps us bring more magical, thought-provoking stories to life. Join our family, tap the bell so you never miss an adventure, and share your thoughts or personal stories in the comments below. Let's keep our spirits strong together. See you in the next tale.